Hasn't the chamber done a great job here with this, making this space so pretty, you know? What a great, how many of you are here for Shane and Megan? Shane and Megan, what an inspiration. Can you imagine those kids' children? Oh my gosh, they're gonna be so beautiful. Anyway, did you get to use the men's room too? That was nice. I know, that's the best part. Although it makes me think of a joke. How many men does it take to change the toilet paper roll? We don't know, it's never been done. I know, that's just what I heard anyway. Well, I hope you're all doing well. You all doing well? Me too. Other than a little soreness in my foot, I feel great today. And I don't take that for granted anymore, I'll have you know. In our increasingly complex, stress-filled world, feeling good is no small chore. And it often doesn't come easily. And I can also attest to the fact that as you get older, I know I want to grow up to be an old woman too, but I can testify to the fact that it doesn't come without a bit of effort. With the possible exception of a small percentage of you here today who have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, because you feel good all the time for no apparent reason. I know you're out there because I'm married to a man like you. My husband, Tom, is a chronically happy man. Tom wakes up happy every morning, he stays happy all day long, and he falls asleep in about 2.4 seconds with a smile on his face. A smile, incidentally, I had nothing to do with. Folks, I'm not like Tom. I have to work at feeling good, and I've learned it the hard way. First, by breaking every rule of health and fitness there is to break, and then working to repair the damage. So I'm really in no position to lecture you or anyone else about the joy of soy. I struggle daily to eat right and avoid poor choices when it comes to my health. But what I would like to share with you this evening is what I've learned as a health and fitness reporter for 27 years at Channel 10, but even more importantly, through my own stumbling and bumbling over the last 56 years, only to come to the realization, as Deb said, I can't be, and neither can you, be the most effective, productive, joy-filled person if you don't take care of yourself. A little background, I'm from the great state of Iowa. I grew up in the Hawkeye State, raised by great parents. My mom was the encourager. My dad was the lecturer. Dad parented my siblings and me through an endless series of lectures. You know, money doesn't grow on trees. Nothing good happens after midnight, you know. But his favorite lecture had to do with health. He'd talk about, you know, Carol, when you've got your health, you've got just about everything. It turns out my dad was right about a lot of things, actually. I just wish I'd listened sooner to his advice about the importance of good health. It isn't that many years ago I considered it a badge of honor to run myself ragged. I'd get up early so I could compulsively squeeze in an 8-mile run. I'd skip breakfast so I could attend a function I simply couldn't say no to. And I'd miss lunch because, well, it was a busy day at work. And then I'd find myself surprisingly hungry after the 5 o'clock news. So I'd dash down the hall to the vending machines and load up on M&Ms and coffee, work the night shift until after the 11 o'clock news, drive home exhausted and wired, and have a couple of glasses of cheap wine to unwind. And I wondered why I wasn't feeling good. After all, I was getting nutrients from the 4 major food groups: sugar, chocolate, caffeine, and alcohol. I was treating my car better than my body, ladies. I think part of the problem, though, is that health and fitness get such a bad rap these days. You talk about good health, and you can almost see the walls going up as people envision a life without chocolate. You know, a life of nothing but broccoli and aerobics. Yeah, I'm a runner. I was a runner before this disaster happened, and runners are an interesting group of people, very arrogant, actually. No offense to you runners out there, because I am one. And we know that the world is made up of only 2 kinds of people: runners and non-runners. Well, one of my non-running friends a few years ago sent me a little cartoon that she'd clipped out of a magazine, just a 1-panel cartoon. Had a couple of guys on a street corner, 2 pot-bellied guys watching a group of runners go by. They had bib numbers on their t-shirts, so it was obviously an organized running event of some sort. And the one pot-bellied guy turns to the other pot-bellied guy and says, "Boy, you know times are tough when you can get people to run 26 miles for a $10 t-shirt." You know, spoken like true non-runners. You don't run for the t-shirt, right? I mean, that's just, actually, I have run for the t-shirt, you know. I'll take anything that's free ultimately, but I feel bad for those guys, especially if they don't know what it's like to finish a marathon or a 10K or the amazing race. or a bike ride around the bay, or just a walk through the neighborhood. I'm not talking about winning or setting records. I'm talking about how good it feels physically and mentally when we're active. Okay, dry mouth city here. See, that didn't happen to Megan. That's right, she's the pro here. Folks, we were meant to move. And our high-tech world, while certainly making our lives easier, is at the same time robbing us of the natural feeling that comes from using our muscles. Just think about it. Those of you who are long enough may be able to follow along with me. When I was growing up in the Midwest, the highlight of our summer was going to Grandma and Grandpa's house in central Illinois on an old farm, a sprawling farmhouse on 80 acres of beans and corn. It was a fun place to go because there was a pit to swim in. And when we were done swimming in the pit, we'd be schlepped down to the basement of the farmhouse to take off our wet clothes. And we get to run them one piece at a time through something called a wringer. Now this thing, I mean, if you didn't get the fabric in there just the right way, it took 6 men and a boy to get a towel through that wringer. That's how my grandmother and her parents before her did all of their laundry, after which they would schlep the wet clothes up to the backyard, hang them up with clothespins, one piece at a time, burning a few calories along the way, do you think? Fast forward a generation. I don't want you to feel sorry for me, but my mother didn't have a food processor. She chopped her onions and celery by hand and risked burning a calorie and using a muscle group in the process. My dad actually had to climb out of his car every time he wanted to open and close the garage. I'm old enough to remember a time when you had to get up out of your chair every time you wanted to turn the station on the TV. Gentlemen out there with your zappers going, how would you like that one? I love technology, but I just read where a couple of researchers have now found that sending email, now I'm talking about the workplace, not to Aunt Bessie in Poughkeepsie, that makes good sense. I'm talking about sending email to the guy in the cubicle next to you instead of getting up out of your chair and delivering the message in person. Well, some Harvard researchers crunched the numbers and they say that if you no longer walk a measly 2 minutes an hour due to switching to email, you can easily gain a pound a year. And folks, it's more than burned calories. Studies on the relationship, we've heard here, for those of you who heard the earlier speakers, on the relationship between exercise and the lower incidence of all sorts of disease conditions, not to mention improved mental health and cognitive function, have been overwhelming over the years. And I could quote you a bunch of scientific research about how exercise releases all sorts of mood-elevating chemicals like, endorphins and epinephrine and serotonin. But those are the only ones I can pronounce, so I better stop here. The bottom line is, it feels good. And I believe many of us have forgotten what it's like to feel good. Now, for the record, and before I go any further, I should point out I have not always been the poster girl for fitness. In fact, as a kid, I was totally sedentary, too much of a klutz to even consider participation in sports. By the time I was in 6th grade, the years of inactivity and eating to make myself feel better turned me into the laughingstock of the neighborhood. Carol LeBeau, they used to call me. My self-esteem was pathetic. And it's not as though I didn't have good role models either. My parents lived very healthful lifestyles. I remember Mom serving several fresh vegetables, like Mimi suggested, with dinner every night before the health experts said that was the thing to do. My dad may be one of the original health nuts. Dad was crazy. We think he's the first guy to actually jog in the state of Iowa. And it was embarrassing. Dad was an avid fan of the exercise guru from the 60s and 70s, Dr. Kenneth Cooper, and his theories about aerobic exercise. Theories that today, of course, are universal truths. In fact, wanting to help me with my overweight condition, my parents were very supportive. My mom would fix me diet Jell-O for dessert, and my dad, he would weigh me in the living room every Saturday morning to see if I'd made any progress. I have a great dad. He's just a little short in the sensitivity department. And I would get $1 if I lost a pound. All of which, of course, did nothing for my weight problem, and it sure didn't help my self-esteem. Fortunately, they eventually tried the local YMCA, and boy, I was enrolled in everything they had to offer. I was twirling batons, attempting forward rolls on the gymnastics mat, bouncing on trampolines, failing miserably at everything, until thankfully they signed me up for swimming lessons, and we found an activity I could do. Looking back, I now realize that my first encounter with physical fitness was also going to be my first step toward mental and emotional health. It would ultimately help me cope with life and give me a sense of self. In fact, I can tell you quite frankly, swimming changed my life. I am certain without it, I would never have had the gumption to pursue a college degree, a career in broadcast journalism, or even the courage to simply present before you tonight.